Stratocaster hung in Michael Jackson's hands like a weapon loaded with 20 years of hidden musical knowledge. 5,272 people held their breath in the hallowed silence of Royal Albert Hall. And Jeff Beck, the man who'd publicly called him a rhythm player at best, was about to eat his words without saying a single one. November 15th, 1987. Royal Albert Hall's red velvet seats glowed like embers under amber house lights. Every seat filled, every balcony tier packed, every standing space near the ornate stage claimed by fans who knew they were witnessing the Bad World Tour at its absolute peak. The circular architecture trapped anticipation like a cathedral, mixing expensive perfume with leather jackets and that unmistakable electric hum that only happens when thousands of people sense something historic approaching. This wasn't just any venue. This was where Hendrix had played, where Clapton recorded his legendary unplugged sessions, where guitar history had been written in wood and wire and sweat. Tonight, those acoustics would carry the sound of a challenge being answered in the most public way imaginable. Front row center, a man in a perfectly tailored black blazer sat motionless as stone. Jeff Beck's silver hair caught the stage lights like spun metal. His weathered hands that had crafted some of the most influential guitar work in rock history, rested completely still on his knees. At 43, he was already a guitar god, a musician's musician, a living legend who commanded respect from peers like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page. Tonight, he was a man about to have everything he believed about musical hierarchy challenged by someone he'd dismissed as a mere entertainer. Behind him, 5,271 other people chatted excitedly in dozens of languages, unaware they were about to witness something that had never happened before in the history of major concerts. An 8-minute instrumental challenge that would rewrite the boundaries between pop stardom and musical mastery, between entertainment and artistry, between what people thought they knew about Michael Jackson and who he really was when the glitter fell away. What nobody in that audience knew was this. 3 months earlier, Michael Jackson had read 5 words in a magazine that cut through his confidence like a blade through silk. 5 words that would lead to 8 minutes of pure musical revolution in the most unlikely musical conversation in rock history. September 12th, 1987. Morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Michael's Encino home, casting long shadows across the marble kitchen counter. Coffee steamed in his favorite ceramic mug, a simple white cup. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed superstar. He preferred his mornings quiet, private, human. His assistant, Patricia, had left the latest issue of Guitar World magazine on the granite surface with a yellow sticky note attached. Her handwriting was precise and careful. Page 47. Thought you should see this. Not sure if you'll want to, but you should. That should have been warning enough. Guitar World wasn't Rolling Stone or People. This was serious musician territory, the kind of publication that treated guitar playing like both science and art form, where technique mattered more than album sales and respect was earned through 6 strings, not stage presence. Michael settled into his breakfast routine. Fresh orange juice, wheat toast, sometimes fruit if his trainer was coming by later. These mundane moments grounded him, reminded him that beneath the sequined gloves and moonwalks, he was still just a guy from Gary, Indiana, who happened to have conquered the world through sheer will and supernatural talent. He flipped through the magazine casually. Guitar reviews, amplifier comparisons, technique articles written in language that assumed deep musical knowledge. This was Jeff Beck's world, Eric Clapton's world, the inner circle of guitar virtuosity, where his name rarely appeared, unless it was to dismiss pop music as somehow lesser than real guitar work. Page 47. The headline read, Jeff Beck on Today's Guitar Heroes and Pretenders. Michael's stomach dropped before he even read the interview. He knew what was coming. He'd felt it building for years, the skepticism from the guitar community, the assumption that pop success somehow invalidated musical ability, the belief that entertaining millions meant you couldn't possibly understand the deeper mysteries of the instrument. The interviewer had asked, "What do you think of pop stars who play guitar? We see a lot of crossover these days." Jeff Beck's response was printed in crisp black ink, every word a small knife carefully placed. Michael Jackson? Look, he's a great entertainer, incredible dancer, pop genius. I respect his success immensely. But guitar? He's a rhythm player at best. All that funk stuff, it's repetitive, simple chord progressions. Real guitarists play blues, rock, jazz fusion, dynamics, complexity, silence. Michael fills every space with production, effects, technology. That's not guitar mastery, that's studio magic. Michael's hand tightened around his coffee mug. The ceramic felt suddenly fragile in his grip, like it might shatter from the tension flowing through his fingers. But Jeff Beck wasn't finished. The knife went deeper. And those solos in Beat It, Eddie Van Halen played those. Everyone in the industry knows that. Dirty Diana. That's session musicians doing the heavy lifting. Michael's a frontman who holds a guitar as a prop, part of the choreography. There's a difference between playing guitar and being a guitarist. He's never proven he can do what we do, stand alone with 6 strings and make people feel something real without all the bells and whistles. Michael read those words 3 times. Each reading felt like a physical blow, hitting different spots of his musical soul. The accusations stung because they carried grains of truth that Michael had spent years trying to ignore. Yes, Eddie Van Halen had played the Beat It solo. Yes, he often used session musicians for complex parts. Yes, his live performances relied heavily on production values, choreography, spectacle. But was that because he couldn't play, or because he chose not to? The kitchen fell deadly silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the tick of an antique grandfather clock Patricia had bought for him last Christmas. Outside, Los Angeles hummed with its usual energy. Gardeners mowing perfectly manicured lawns, expensive cars navigating the winding streets of Encino. Life continuing as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. But inside, Michael sat frozen, staring at the magazine page until the words blurred into abstract shapes. For 10 full minutes, he didn't move, didn't breathe properly, didn't think in complete sentences. Studio magic, frontman with a prop, never proven he can do what we do. The accusations cut so deep because they echoed his own secret fears. What if they were right? What if all his musical knowledge, all those late-night practice sessions, all the complex compositions he wrote but never recorded, were just elaborate self-deception? What if he really was just a dancer who happened to sing? Michael stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the imported Italian tile floor. His reflection stared back at him from the window overlooking the San Fernando Valley. At 29, he was the biggest star in the world. His album Thriller had sold more copies than any record in human history. He could fill any stadium on any continent. Children knew his name in countries where they didn't speak English. And yet Jeff Beck, a guitarist's guitarist, a musician's musician, had just dismissed him as a fake. Then something clicked. Not anger exactly, something colder and more focused. Michael walked to the far end of the kitchen, where his thoughts had room to breathe and expand. For years, he'd carried the secret knowledge of his own musical abilities like a hidden treasure. The late-night piano sessions where he worked through John Coltrane's giant steps, changes until his fingers bled. The guitar practice sessions in empty studios after everyone had gone home, learning Wes Montgomery's solos note for note. The complex orchestral arrangements he wrote in his head during those endless limousine rides between venues. He'd hidden his deeper musical self behind the pop perfection, partly from humility, partly from strategy. Why prove you could play bebop when Billie Jean was touching millions of hearts? Why show off jazz fusion when Thriller was bringing joy to children worldwide? But now that strategy felt like cowardice. Michael picked up the phone with a steady hand. "Get me Jeff Beck's management," he said quietly, his voice carrying a new quality Patricia had never heard before. Authority, purpose, steel wrapped in silk. "I want to invite him to the Royal Albert Hall show. Front row, VIP treatment, backstage access if he wants it." Patricia appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tone in his voice. "You're inviting the man who just dismissed you publicly?" Michael's eyes were still fixed on the magazine, but his voice was calm and certain. "I'm inviting a master who forgot something important. You can't teach someone who thinks they know everything. but you can remind them why they fell in love with music in the first place. He paused, thinking through implications and possibilities. And Patricia, make sure he gets a copy of this interview with the invitation. I want him to remember exactly what he said when he's sitting in that front row seat. The invitation went out September 15th, hand-delivered by courier to Jeff Beck's management company in London. But this wasn't a standard VIP invitation printed on glossy cardstock. Michael had written a personal note on his private letterhead, each word carefully chosen. Jeff, I read your Guitar World interview. You said I've never proven I can stand alone with 6 strings and make people feel something real. You're absolutely right. I haven't proven that yet, but would you like to be the first to see? Front row, Royal Albert Hall, November 15th. No studio magic, no session musicians, no production tricks. Just me, a guitar, and 8 minutes to change your mind. Come hear what you think you know about Michael Jackson. MJ. Jeff Beck's manager called back within 3 hours, his voice carrying equal parts amusement and curiosity. Jeff accepts, he said over the transatlantic line. He's very curious. Intrigued, actually. He's also wondering if you know what you're getting yourself into. Michael smiled for the first time since reading the interview, feeling something lift from his chest. Good. Curiosity is where learning begins. And tell Jeff, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. What Jeff Beck didn't know was that Michael had already begun preparing for something unprecedented in the history of major stadium concerts. An 8-minute instrumental showcase that would strip away every element of the Michael Jackson stage persona, except the one thing that mattered most: pure, undiluted musical ability. October 3rd, 1987. A private rehearsal studio tucked away in an industrial complex in North Hollywood, the kind of anonymous building where celebrities could practice without paparazzi harassment. The room was deliberately sparse, soundproofed walls covered in gray foam, minimal lighting, basic recording equipment gathering dust in corners, and 3 guitars hanging on black metal stands like waiting soldiers. Michael stood alone with a 1965 Fender Stratocaster, its sunburst finish showing decades of honest wear. The same model Jeff Beck had made legendary, the same instrument that had cried through "Cause We've Ended as Lovers" and screamed through Beck's Bolero. There was poetry in the choice, cosmic justice in facing a master with an instrument that spoke his native tongue. For 3 hours every day for the next 6 weeks, Michael would practice in complete secrecy. No band members knew, no managers were informed. Even Quincy Jones, his closest musical collaborator, remained unaware. This was between Michael and the guitar, between doubt and certainty, between who people thought he was and who he actually was when nobody was watching. The guitar felt different in private than it did during recording sessions. Heavier, more honest, more demanding. When you stripped away the production teams, the effects processors, the studio magic Jeff Beck had mentioned, what remained was naked truth. Either you could play or you couldn't. Either music lived in your fingers or it didn't. Michael could play. He'd always been able to play. The secret was as old as his career. He'd been playing since he was 8 years old, teaching himself blues licks from B.B. King and Albert King records during those endless Jackson 5 tour bus rides between cities. While his brothers slept, Michael would sit with oversized headphones clamped over his ears, rewinding cassette tapes until the magnetic coating wore thin, learning every bend, every vibrato, every subtle technique that made the blues masters cry through their instruments. During the off-the-wall sessions in 1979, Quincy Jones had arrived at the studio at 2 a.m. to pick up some forgotten sheet music, only to find Michael alone at the grand piano, working through the chord changes to John Coltrane's Giant Steps. His small hands moved across the keys with impossible precision, playing harmonic progressions that required years of jazz study to understand, let alone execute. You should showcase this more, Quincy had said, genuinely impressed. People don't know how deep your musical knowledge goes. Michael had shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. The songs don't need it. Why show off when the music speaks for itself? But now one song would need everything. 8 minutes of pure instrumental conversation with one of the greatest guitarists alive. 8 minutes to prove that pop success and musical depth weren't mutually exclusive. 8 minutes to answer every question Jeff Beck had raised about his abilities. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a legend in the house tonight. Jeff Beck, one of the greatest guitarists who ever lived. 5,272 people turned and applauded. Jeff stood, gracious and surprised, but Michael wasn't finished. Jeff, a few weeks ago, you said something in an interview. You said I use studio magic instead of skill, that real guitarists play blues, rock, jazz fusion, that my guitar work is just rhythm playing. The applause died. Jeff's smile froze. The tension coiled between stage and front row. You know what, Jeff? Michael paused. You're right. Confusion rippled through the audience. Was Michael agreeing? I do rely on production, because I choose to. Michael picked up the Stratocaster. But tonight, for you, I'm playing 8 minutes of pure instrumental guitar. No vocals, no studio magic, no session musicians. Just this. He held up the guitar. I'm playing your styles, blues, rock, jazz fusion, then mine. We'll see if it's just rhythm playing. Jeff Beck leaned forward. This he wanted to see. Michael turned to his band. No vocals. E minor. Freeform. He closed his eyes and played the first note. A slow, bent E minor note filled the hall like confession. Michael's fingers found the strings without looking. Muscle memory, instinct, something deeper than technique. The Stratocaster sang in Jeff Beck's language. Slow blues, B.B. King bends, Clapton phrasing. But there was something else. Soul that spoke of real pain transformed into beauty. Michael's pick disappeared. Fingers only now. The tone became more vocal, more expressive. This was Jeff's signature technique, making the guitar weep. Jeff Beck sat up straighter. He's doing my technique. Controlled feedback came next. Michael leaned into the amplifier, building sustain, then pulled back, shaping sound with his body. Harmonics bloomed and died. The guitar screamed soft, then loud, finding that sweet spot where volume became emotion. This wasn't imitation. This was conversation. Without warning, the blues dissolved into something angular. The time signature shifted. 4/4 became 5/4, then 7/8. Michael's left hand found chord voicing that shouldn't work but did. Wes Montgomery octaves, Pat Metheny harmonies. Jeff Beck pulled out a notebook and started writing. Those changes, he whispered, that's graduate-level composition, in real time. This wasn't pop music theory. This was sophisticated jazz knowledge, applied with the fluidity of natural conversation. Tertia VI progressions that resolved unexpectedly. Tritone substitutions that pulled the ear in new directions. The bassist and drummer followed changes they'd never rehearsed, finding the pocket in impossible time signatures. Jeff Beck closed his notebook. This required full attention. The jazz dissolved and funk arrived. But not the simple funk Jeff had dismissed. This was architecture, mathematics, meditation. It started deceptively simple. E minor groove, syncopated, infectious. Then bar 8 brought chromatic passing tones. The groove stayed the same, but harmonic content shifted, adding color and complexity. Bar 16, polyrhythm. Guitar in 3/4 while bass and drums held 4/4. 2 time signatures at once, both grooving perfectly. Bar 24, the impossible. Michael played chords and melodies simultaneously. Left hand forming jazz voicings on lower strings, right hand pulling single-note lines on higher strings. 2 complete guitar parts from one instrument. Jeff Beck gasped audibly. How is he doing that? Michael brought everything together. Left hand, jazz chords shifting every 2 bars. Right hand, blues bends crying and singing. Rhythm, funk groove, steady as heartbeat. Dynamics, the full Jeff Beck range. The solo built like great storytelling. Each phrase answered the previous one. This wasn't showing off. This was composition happening live. Jeff Beck was on his feet, applauding while music still played. His face showed surprise, respect, joy, and recognition. One master acknowledging another. The final 30 seconds. Perfect fusion of everything. Blues emotion, jazz sophistication, funk rhythm, rock power. All flowing together like streams joining a river. The last note, sustained feedback, held for 10 seconds. Jeff Beck's signature move. Michael let it fill every corner of Royal Albert Hall. Then silence. 3 seconds of absolute quiet. Then 5,272 people exploded. The standing ovation lasted 12 minutes. Jeff Beck applauded with hands above his head, shaking his head in amazement. Michael walked to the microphone. That was 8 minutes. No vocals, no studio magic. Blues, rock, jazz fusion, funk, all instrumental. He looked at Jeff. You said my guitar work is repetitive. I just showed you repetition is meditation. Like Ravel's Bolero? Minimalism is mastery. Jeff nodded slowly. He understood now. And you said I rely on studio magic. I just proved I don't need it. I choose it because production adds layers, not a crutch, an expansion. Jeff Beck, Michael said. Come up here. Jeff walked to the stage. Michael handed him the microphone. Michael, Jeff's voice cracked. I need to apologize. I dismissed this man. I said he uses studio magic instead of skill. I was wrong. He looked at Michael. You just rewrote what I thought I knew about guitar. That wasn't just technique, that was composition. You told a story without words. Can we play together? Right now? The crowd erupted. What key? Michael asked. E minor. You lead, I'll follow. What happened next would be talked about for decades. 10 minutes of guitar dialogue that moved through every emotion. Call and response. Neither leading, both dancing. Eric Clapton, 3 rows back, texted someone, Michael and Jeff, this is historic. In the final moment, both hit the same note simultaneously. Perfect unison. Neither had planned it. Both had heard it coming. Backstage afterward, they talked for hours. How long have you been playing like this? Jeff asked. Since I was 7. Self-taught, mostly. That technique, I studied at Leeds College for years. Formal training gives vocabulary. Self-teaching gives accent, Michael said. I learned by listening to you, Clapton, Hendrix, then added my voice. Jeff was quiet. Why wait until now? Because you needed to say it. Your words gave me permission to prove it. Without your challenge, those 8 minutes don't exist. So thank you. They recorded together in 1988. Private sessions at Abbey Road that lasted 8 hours. The tapes were never released but circulated among musicians like treasures. Guitar World published Jeff's retraction. Real mastery isn't about purity, it's about synthesis. Michael taught me that there are as many valid approaches to guitar as there are people who love it. When Michael passed in 2009, Jeff's statement read, he showed me that refusing to limit yourself isn't weakness, it's courage. The Royal Albert Hall performance became legend, not just for the music, but for what it represented. The night ego gave way to curiosity. The night a challenge became a conversation between masters. Real mastery isn't proving you're the best. It's proving there's always more to learn, even from people you thought you had figured out. The most powerful moment in music history wasn't a solo. It was a duet that almost didn't happen, born from a challenge that became mutual understanding, respect, and true friendship between masters. A moment that proved music has no boundaries when hearts speak the same language, through instruments that sing the truth of human experience in all its complex, beautiful, and eternally surprising forms that connect us all across every divide that separates human beings from one another through music's eternal and timeless universal musical truth.